All right, welcome to the first episode of whatever the hell this is. I'm just going to be talking about Gundam. I've wanted to do this for a while. I wanted to basically I'm a big fan of Gundam. If you don't know, my most of my anime Fridays last year, late last year were like pretty much well, it's actually about around this time last year we're all like Gundam. I was watching last year to the end of last year, beginning of this year. I was going through Gundam again. I was watching it. I mean everything in UC. I have the whole timeline up here right now, and I'm only going to talk about UC though because it's the generally known as the main one. Uh, there's a lot of spin-off timelines like Future Century where you get G Gundam, the memeable one, um, which is funny because when I was in high school, I remember really being into G Gundam, and these elitist pricks were like, "Oh, that's a kids show. That's kids Gundam." I'm like, "But it's cool." It wasn't that cool as I got older, but it's funny. It's like very like meme worthy. So I enjoy its presence these days because it does have that like silliness to it. Obviously, most of the West was kind of introduced to Gundam through Wing. People tend to riff on Wing, saying it's overhyped, and it kind of is. But I think it serves a very important role, and it's special to a lot of people over here uh, because it was the introduction of Gundam. So, I mean, can you really hate on Wing when it opened up the window or opened up the door for more Gundam fans to get into it? I mean, if you want to get down to like the stigmata of Gundam, you could just fucking go on and say that the whole goddamn show is just a boomer show. Like you talk about anime, you talk about what younger people watch these days is not Gundam. It's it's just not. Like I don't even really think mechs in general are kind of big. I don't know because I don't exactly keep up with whatever's new, but Gundam is it's not my favorite anime, but kinda is because I don't really consider it like it's just to me it's just a show that I really enjoy. It's a show about war and mobile suits and politicking and people caught up into the terrible shit that is war, and I like it. While I've watched most of this like G Gundam, Gundam Wing, I haven't watched Gundam X. Probably the list would be shorter if I just go down the list of things that I haven't watched. I haven't seen Gundam X. I haven't seen Seed. I've seen a few episodes and something happened and I couldn't finish watching it, or I lost interest, which is probably the case because there was a long period of years that went where I was just burning through anime, just trying to watch whatever I hadn't seen before. I think that was one of them. Seed was rather new. I mean, I say new, but it's like old now. It's I don't know. It came out around like what 2003, 2005, something like that. Seen one of the Gunpla Builder shows. Was it Gundam Builders Try or Gundam Builders, Gundam Fighters, Gundam Build Fighters, whatever? Those all take place in the actual AD. A Gundam. Oh yeah. Gundam Double O. I've seen a bit of. I haven't finished it. I think I started losing interest like about 6 or 7 episodes in, and I just haven't finished it. But I have started watching it. I think I like it better than Seed, but I mean that's not saying much because I really don't remember watching Seed. But I do like. I don't know. It's okay. It's set in AD, so it's set like in our time, but really far in the future, like 300 years into the future. As you can see, it says 2307 AD. Talking about the UC timeline. That's what we're doing here. Have the 1 year war. Okay, well, see, first let me let me break it to you down like this. When Gundam started, it was 0079 1 Year War Mobile Suit Gundam. And then there was a bunch of spin-offs. There's just been not spin-offs, but like additional installments in the same timeline. You had Mobile Suit Gundam, Zeta Gundam, Double Zeta, Char's Counterattack, F91, and Victory. and then like Unicorn came later. So you see, it's very similar to like Legend of Zelda series about how the games went forward chronologically, and then everything that's come out since the first two Zelda games have been prequels and oh, this happened between this, and oh, these happened between that. So especially like during dealing with the 1 Year War, during the 1 Year War too, there was a lot. Like I haven't seen MS Igloo, I haven't seen Apocalypse 0079. I have seen War in the Pocket and 083. I've meant to do this last year when I was fresh off a Gundam, and I'm kind of in a place now where I haven't really been streaming a whole lot because of things. But I wanted to do this, so I'm gonna do it. Let's start with 0079. All right. Well, I mean, first of all, what do I really need to say about the? I don't have a lot of notes on the 0079 because there's not a lot I need to say that hasn't already been said and is kind of inherently obvious from it being the progenitor of the whole series. And that's it's the first in the series. It's dated. It was basically done back in 1979, and I think that's you'll see that. I think that was parodied in the UC year 0079. It establishes the world, the characters, and the mobile suits. That's basically the bulk of it. It establishes humanity has moved to space. We live on Earth, but we also live in space colonies, and Earth basically controls the space colonies from Earth, and space colonists, aka space noids, whatever, spacemen, as they can be referred to in the series, they don't like that, or they grow to not like that because kind of the Earth Federation is, got this hand over them. Well, there's a whole bunch. This is where all the politics come in, the wartime politics. Zeon Zum Daikun, who comes out with his uh, not manifesto, but just his theory on new types and how humans born in space off of Earth will evolve into new types, or the potential is there. And he basically is peacefully advocating that they don't really rely on Earth anymore, that they kind of break away and become their own thing in space because they don't want to be tied down with Earth. Because that's really what the whole series of Gundam really boils down to: old versus new, both in age and ideologies. And that's why there's a distinct new type and old type going on. Not a lot is necessarily explained about the background of what led up to the 1 Year War, and that is later documented in the 2015 release of The Origin. The Origin, which is basically the prequel, like the very first prequel to what the events of 0079. So it's basically like The Origin is about 10 years in the past, and it leads up, it time skips too to when everybody's older, and like right up until the very first episode of Gundam. So it in itself is very important in explaining things. I might touch on it a bit more later, but maybe not. So new type versus old type, and there's that whole like the space noids want to get away from Earth's control. So Earth doesn't like that. Obviously, the Federation is like, nope, no, you're part of us. We control you. And the Zabi family comes in. Well, they've been there from basically the beginning. As Daegwon Zabi was basically like friends with Ziamzu Daikun. I use as many air quotes as possible. And so herein comes the sneaky Zabi family, who are basically the main villains of the 1 Year War, for multiple people, including Char and people on the Xeon side. And they kill Xeon Zum Daikun, and they're like basically played up as like a martyr, like, oh, you see, the Federation killed him. You look what they did. And it starts the 1 Year War basically. Well, it gives them an excuse. It gives him, Daegwon, and Giran the excuse to like incite riots and start violence and stuff like that and further their agenda. It's all about that. I guess to not be so rigid about this, and to where I'm like just outright trying to lay out what happens, in sequence. Because why would you need to listen to me tell you that? Just watch it. It's good. It will be spoiler heavy. I'm just going to talk about it and like what I like about it, what I don't like about it, what generally happens in the series and stuff like that. So anyway, the zombie family, they basically kill Zeon Zoom Daikun, and then all this shit happens and Char kind of grows up obviously resenting the Zabi family, not necessarily because of Zeon Daikun, but what happened to his mother, what they do to her, and he infiltrates the Zabi family by befriending Garma and he's just he's Char is one of the new types. He's got the special abilities. He's really good at piloting a mobile suit. Red mobile suit, the red Zaku, and everything else he has, Zagax and Gelgoog at the end, and then finally the Zeong. And so 0079 is basically his rivalry with Amuro, who, up until the point where he meets Amuro, he's kind of on that path of he's kind of unmatched and just in it to get revenge. Char he's very charismatic and he's very idealistic, but he's also kind of simple in the sense that he's driven by his own just obsessive nature with revenge and kind of like trying to, in a twisted way, make his father's ideals a reality with the whole new types, because he eventually starts talking about that, but that's more like in Zeta, and I'm not there yet. So, Origin is absolutely a companion piece to the original 0079. It's going to be extreme, like, whiplash in terms of animation, though, because the Origin was made relatively recently, and the original 0079 is old and dated. And, I mean, it's still good. Like, it's still classic. I think there's some really great animation moments. There's some really, like, keystone animation moments where they've become they're very important later. Like anime, a lot of future anime will reference a lot, either humorously or otherwise. Much like how in Akira, the bike sliding scene, which has been referenced a shit ton in a lot of things, including anime and not anime, because it is so iconic. There's a lot of moments like that in the original Gundam, so it's definitely worth watching. I mean, it may be hard to power through because of the animation. Some people are really affected by that. It doesn't really bother me a whole lot because I accept it for what it is. It was 1979. It's very old, but I'm just in it for the story mainly, and there's some, like I said, it's not all like terribly animated, but there's a lot of errors and weird looking stuff. I do think the Gundam Blu-rays do a good job of cleaning up some stuff, but I mean they can only do so much. So basically, the protagonist of Gundam is Amuro Ray, and you meet Amuro very early on, the very first episode, and it all leads up to the trope of the kid getting into the mech and being good at piloting it throughout the rest of Gundam and other series. It's this case, including Zone of the Enders, if I remember correctly. I think this also starts one of the best rivalries of Amuro and Char in all of Gundam and definitely anime in general. Amuro is the protagonist, and technically Char is the antagonist. I think he's more like a secondary protagonist slash. He's kind of in the middle. He's very important to the story, but I wouldn't inherently call Char at this point evil. I think it's very obvious that he's motivated by revenge. It's even more obvious after you watch the origin. Like I said, it's the companion piece to this. And the 1 Year War, if isn't obvious, it's probably one of the most devastating wars. I don't think anything really touches how bad the 1 Year War is after this in Gundam, because half of humanity dies. Like, there's a point to where they were fighting, and basically before mobile suits became prevalent, they were just nuking each other in chemical warfare and dropping colonies will die. It's how Earth gets even more fucked up. Like, it sets the precedent for later in the series. They keep talking about how the Earth keeps degrading and people need to stop fighting, and this whole, there's a whole, while it's about war, it's also about not war. war is bad. That's what Gundam is. It's war is bad, and war keeps happening. New types. This is where it doesn't really the new type aspect is there, and it's like it's spoken, and Xeon Doom Daikun and all that, but it's not really it doesn't really make apparent until like Char and Amuro run into each other, and then you have like the new type spark. So it's like ding, and then, they sense stuff that Amuro can pilot the Gundam for the first time, and he gets more proficient with it very quickly, and it's like weird and unheard of because usually people. I mean, the Gundam itself is its Federation's like very first mobile suit. Uh, Later on in the series, it is shown at the 1 Year War that they started mass producing them at the end. They weren't, none of the Gundams that were mass produced were anywhere near as sturdily built as the original OG Gundam because of how it's made. It's the one and the only, like you have Gun Cannon, Gun Tank, who were part of the Gundam team, but they weren't anywhere near as strong or as sturdy as the actual Gundam itself. And Amuro is part of the crew of the White Base, so all these characters are involved in it. The most important ones are pretty depicted here, which are, well, I mean, they're basically the main characters on the Federation side. You got Bright Noah, who's the captain, Mirai, who's the pilot, or the she flies the ship, the White Base. Amuro himself, Sayla, who is Artesia and Char's sister. You have Fraubo, the kids. I don't remember their names. The kids. You have Hayato, Kai, and not depicted Ryu. And those are basically all the main people of White Base. There's kids because in the beginning of the show, the attack on Side 7 and disabling or attacking the Gundam or trying to disable the Gundam before it, they didn't realize it was put together, leads the White Base to take on a bunch of civilians because of the panic, and some of them stay and become plot points in the future. I think when it starts, it's pretty. I mean, like starts to halfway, it's all pretty normal stuff. Like there isn't too much. When I say normal, I mean there's not too much like crazy new type stuff. But towards the end of 0079, it's been a while since I've seen it. Specifically the end of 0079. I remember the beginning very well. Mainly because I played through Journey to Jaburo, and that goes up until the halfway point. But the latter half of Gundam, there's a lot of new type stuff, including the involvement of one Lala Soon. She's an interesting character, and I use that very lightly too in quotation marks because I don't really understand the importance of Lala other than Amuro and Char both had a connection to her, and she was kind of bridging the gap between them. But in a twist of events, she gets killed and becomes the catalyst of basically Char and Amuro not being able to forgive each other. And I don't know, they really can't get over it, but at the same time, they get along for a little while. It's very strange what Lala Soon's death meant because to me, her death was like it's obviously very heavy in the show and very serious, but like at the same time, she was never very established as a character. And I'm like, why should I care? But it's like a huge deal. It's a very huge catalyst, and it is expanded a little bit further upon in the origin where she appears in front of Char, and Char takes her in through a sequence of events that I just will just let you see for yourself, and they have a weird relationship where he acts like she's like a mother figure, and she's got the new type thing, and it's all new types, like the new type connection. So Char, Amuro, and Lala all can't like escape each other. Essentially, they're connected psychically, and that's basically what new types is. Actually, new type is just basically it's mystical space magic at its most blunt form I can put it in. Uh, I think it's cool. I think later series kind of take it too far, but I think that's kind of what makes Gundam Gundam. Much of how like space idols and singing is Macross's thing. So there is that, and it is what it is. It's important to the series, but at the same time, sometimes I can take it seriously, sometimes I can't. Sometimes it's just Deus Ex Machina, like this is, to progress the plot. That was my last note. New types. I think it just establishes a bunch of things. It shows the horrors of war. It shows the people who became victims of war, and it establishes characters for the next like 10 or so years in the UC timeline because that's what happens. These characters that you see here go on and eventually, you know, play bigger parts later. Which brings me to Gundam Zeta. Gundam Zeta is probably my favorite installment in the series, and we went from 0079 to UC 0087. It's been a 7 year time gap, and it's the next installment in the series. So basically, Gundam came out. This is in real life now. Gundam came out, and then Z Gundam was the next thing, basically. Uh, it is a step up in terms of animation and music and things like that. See the evolution of the technology in the world, and so that's one of the best things in Gundam is just like watching the people evolve and watching the technology get better and better and better because of war. And an unfortunate reality is that war can generally tend to push technology ahead for good or bad. So we see that a lot, and it actually becomes a plot point later. But Zeta is my favorite series. It is 50 episodes, or is it 49 or 48? It's full length. It's two seasons because you have the first part and then you have the second part of Zeta. It also stars a new main character, Camille Beadon, and he has the most arbitrary start to any Gundam protagonist ever. Like, he's an interesting character in the sense that he's very hot-headed. He's not like Amuro at all. He's very hot-headed. He acts on impulse, and he does not stand for anybody saying his name is a girl's name because that's how the rivalry between him and Jared start, who is part of the Titans, and I'll get into that in a second. Like he overhears them because what's her name? Faye? No, not Faye. Fa. Fa Yuri. Yeah, she's the his you know high school friend and love interest, and she is chasing him around, yelling, "Camille, Camille, Camille!" And then he hears Jared saying, "That's a girl's name," and then runs over, jumps over the security line, and punches a soldier, punches one of the Titans out, and then he gets his ass kicked, and that's how Zeta starts. And oh boy, is it arbitrary as fuck, but you better get used to it because the rest of the series is very heavy, very dark, lots of death. The 1 year war has ended, the Federation won, and now we have a new conflict, which is the Federation who won against Zeon and the zombie family got killed has basically become corrupt. And the setup for Zeta, which I didn't know at the time that I saw it, was 0083, Stardust Memory. That sets up why and exactly the moment how when the Titans were formed and how the Earth Federation, how corrupt they've become. And so Zeta starts with some players from 0079 as the AUG, or Anti-Earth Union Group, and it's Bright Noah, who is now married to Mirai. You have Quattro Vagina, who is not Char. You have Emma, yeah, and then eventually Camille joins. Like the first few episodes are about how that happens, and Fa joins kind of inadvertently. You have Katz and what's her name? That reporter lady on the left by Noah. Oh, Rakoa, and you have Flex, big guy with the beard. He's the captain of the Argama, which is the new white base that you see in the background. Basically, the AU is sponsored by a couple of rich people, including some guy who likes to hit people, and they're fighting against the corrupt Earth Federation, aka the Titans, who are crazy with power and violence and just doing all kinds of terrible things, and it is arguable like what the Titans do right now can be equated to, if not worse, than what the Zombie family did, because they just kind of kill whoever, gas mini colonies, kill children, whatever. It doesn't matter. Take people hostages, whatever. There's a lot of people who switch sides in this show for really dumb reasons. Rakoa. Zeta kind of gets a little like, it's very clear as the intent of what's going on, and it's just the AU versus the Titans, and it really seems kind of imbalanced. But you also have to remember that the AU has got a lot of veterans, including Noah and Quattro Bagina and Hayato and Kai, who would make appearances later. Camille is like the new type. He's like the hot shit right now. Amuro is around, but he can't do anything for part of it, and then he does join and he helps out. Yeah, the Rise of the Titans is basically because of Stardust. Titans are arguably worse than Xeon. Drama. That was one of my notes. Drama. Yeah, there's a lot of drama. A lot of characters, a lot of interactions between the characters, weird relationships between the characters, things that don't really go well. Nothing goes well in this series. Like, when you watch Zeta, you have to realize, and when I say don't go well, I mean, like, the series is good, but don't get too attached to anybody, because, yeah. Also, well, along with all the terrible shit the Titans do, cyber new types are introduced. Several people come out of that, mainly girls. It's a little odd how that's played out, but I think it's because Camille is kind of young, and all of the cyber new types who are made are kind of unstable, and so they involve themselves one way or another with characters. I'm just gonna put it out like, Zeta's great. I love it. There's a lot of like drama that's deserved and that's well placed and written, but there's a lot of really stupid shit that just kind of happens on impulse because characters either lust after other characters or are just kind of being emotionally unstable and just kind of make weird decisions. One of the big pieces to this puzzle of Camille, though, is former Sami. She is another love interest. She kind of is the first love interest, if we want to get technical about it, and then Fa comes in later on really a rebound that's kind of fucked up. But I mean, Camille is not necessarily innocent. It's like he's the protagonist of the story, but you know he's not like scotch free of bad shit that he's done and bad decisions. But I mean, that's the whole point. It's just it's like it's a big soap opera. It's a space soap opera. God damn it, with mechs, and we see that here. If you love mobile suits, I will say that Zeta is basically a step up from 0079. 0079 was the three same damn suits for the Federation and GMs, and then all the real interesting different mobile suits were basically Xeon, because Xeon technically came up with mobile suits, and Federation stole the tech or the idea for the tech. I love that the series starts with the Mark II Gundam that you see here being chased by Psycho Gundam. I love the Mark II. I think it's underrated because it is kind of plain and basic. It's kind of like, because when the series starts, it starts with the Mark IIs. There's multiple of based off the original Gundam, and they're made for the Titans. One gets stolen, obviously, because it's seen here fighting against the Titans. I think it's really cool because it is normal. Like, it's just a normal Gundam. And then you kind of start, as the series goes on, as with all Gundams, the suits start getting kind of more and more overpowered. The titular Zeta Gundam comes in probably about halfway through the series, like in the start of the second season. You get the Zeta, who is built by Camille. Well, not built, but he designed it, which is incredible. He's a genius. Then you see it in action, and it fucking kicks a lot of ass. But for most of the series, it's just the Mark IIs and the Rick Diaz and all kinds of interesting mobile suits. I like it. I enjoy it quite a bit. Cyber new types. Well, Fura Murasame is eventually shows up after. She's not the first one, cyber new type that shows up. That runs into Camille kind of out of combat and out of the suit, so they don't really. She knows who he is, but he doesn't know who she is. They fall in love, and it sets up a lot of like stuff that happens in the future, including bad things. Uh, that goes off into its own thing where she eventually gets killed and just kind of further unstables Camille. And sadly, a lot of Zeta is watching Camille kind of become unraveled because of the horrors of war. And cyber new types are basically an experiment that gateways to other horrible things in the future. That was my next note. And I've already said that, but it is true. A lot of bad shit does come of what the Titans do. That's why I say they're arguably worse than the original Xeon because of the shit they set up. It also introduces us to Ham and Karn, who is one of the best Gundam antagonists ever. I really like her. And Sikoro, who's just kind of a twisted son of a bitch and uses people to his own gain. Both sides, the Aug and the Titans, are racing for the remnants of Xeon's help. It'll turn the tide of war if we get them on our side. So, and lo and behold, Haman Karn and Princess Minerva, who is a major player later, are basically the heads of Neo Xeon, which is what they're introduced as is Neo Xeon. Like Xeon has fallen, and this is the remnants of it. They live at Axis, and they are Neo Xeon. Everybody has their own ideas here. You have the Titans doing their shit, and they're fighting because they think they're right. And you have Haman Karn, who wants to resurrect Xeon and take over everything because she thinks she's right. And then you have the Aug fighting against both of them, and fighting with Neo Xeon eventually. But they're not friends. Like, this is war. This is just politics. No one's really on anybody's side. Everybody's just out for their own shit. And I think that's what makes Zeta so sad is that Camille gets caught in the middle of all that as a kid who kind of doesn't understand why people have to be like this, and it eventually destroys him. And that's the last note I have for Zeta, which is the dark ending, much destruction note. And it's really, yeah, it's really fucked up. It's really sad. I think Zeta does a better job of showing the horrors of war and the casualties of war and kind of like perpetual war in this universe really well with Camille kind of coming unraveled at the end. Not necessarily by his own design. I think part of it is, but I think a lot of it is just extraneous stuff, and a lot of it can be pinned on Sikoro too. That final battle, I think the final two episodes really kind of ramp up really quickly. Maybe too much, in my opinion. I think it could have been smoothed out a little bit better over time, but then you just get like Tomino going crazy at the last two episodes, just killing everybody. Suddenly, just what little sanity Camille had left and just unravels it completely, and he just becomes like a killing machine until he eventually encounters Socorro for the final battle, and there's some weird new type stuff happening. There's a lot of new type stuff happening, period, at this point. But then that happens. So, in terms of like storytelling, mechs, and every animation and music and everything else, and including new type craziness, it all is a natural step up from UC 0079 into UC 87 with Gundam Zeta, and that's why I love the series a lot because Zeta is very, very important for the things that happen later. Everything that happened now in this series is very pivotal, and I think the technology that goes from being relatively like, oh yeah, Mark II Gundam, that's a natural sequel to the RX-78 Gundam, kind of ends with the Zeta, and like you see it kind of getting to a bigger step. Like it's evolving very quickly, how technology has evolved very quickly in real life. And that is Zeta Gundam, which moves us on to next Gundam Double Zeta. So, Gundam Double Zeta, which is the sequel to Zeta Gundam, takes place in UC 0088, and it's right after Zeta. Zeta ends, Double Zeta begins. And that is where a lot of hatred for this series comes from. because Double Zeta is tonal whiplash. And I totally get why people feel the way they do about Double Zeta. Because Double Zeta starts very, very lighthearted and goofy. And I'm talking about it's like Saturday morning cartoon shit, and it takes place right after the end of Zeta. So you follow the Argama still, and it shows up at Side 3, Shangri La, or no, Side 1. It's the very first colony, Shangri La. And it's just like you're so down from watching Zeta, and then Double Zeta, and you get Judao and crew, who is goofy as fuck. Uh, has been seen in that one GIF I showed, like here and here and here. So I think them doing that like that really put a lot of people off to Double Zeta. But you know what? I'm not afraid to admit that I really like Double Zeta. I think if you can get past the goofy shit in the beginning with the kids that it basically introduces to the Argama, there's like, all the adults have died, so you got the ending of Zeta in your head, and now all of a sudden your new protagonists are a bunch of goofy kids. One goofy kid and his sister who's pretty level headed, and then a bunch of other goofy kids in his little wacky junker gang that lives on Side 1 who have been untouched by the war for the most part and have been profiteering off of selling junk and shit. Uh, Basically, suddenly get involved, and it's not even just Judah. Like the villains, Mash Marcello and all kinds of stuff, all these like in his like group of people that follow him around are just wacky, like silly. It's so silly. He's such a huge like simp for Hammond Karn, who is now basically with the ending of Zeta and basically the AU and the Titans taking each other out. Hammond Karn is now posed for the second Neo Zeon, or the Neo Zeon Rising, which is basically what Double Zeta revolves around. Uh, there is new type stuff. In fact, there's a lot of new type stuff. Kind of right off the bat with Judo. Judo is maybe the most new type, the most powerful new type that is revealed later, but you start getting like shades of it at the beginning. And so, despite him being goofy, he's actually really, really powerful and really level. Well, he's not really level headed. He starts off really hot headed and kind of like just acting like a kid, but he kind of comes into his own fairly quickly. Well, after a specific point, especially in the middle of the series, he's pretty level headed. I would say compared to Camille, he's more level headed, but he still gets provoked by the same things that most Gundam protagonists get provoked at. It's just adults being crazy and doing things that are bad and kids don't understand. Where do I start? It's like I know I'm gonna try to defend Double Zeta, but I know at the same time a lot of people are just not gonna have it. But that's fine. You can not like it. I get it. I would say my watching recommendation on this is that finish Zeta and then take a break. Don't watch this immediately after. Take a break, let it all sink in. When you're ready, pop in Double Zeta and go into the beginning of it knowing that it was basically written so whiplash like by Tomino because the ending of Zeta was so damn depressing. I think I can look at it objectively and be like, oh well, this is still fun because it's still Gundam. There's still bad shit going on in the universe, but hey, we got to change pace because this is completely, side one hasn't been like really fucked with the war and stuff like that by the Titans especially. Um, so they're kind of just a bunch of people that are not so well off in terms of money, but and a lot of adults are missing because of the wars at this point. And but they're not really like taken in by the war. They're kind of just kids being kids and doing their own thing. So you have to look at it like that. I would say that just stick with it. Like get past the first half, It's gonna be goofy. There's gonna be the most probably unforgiving thing is not necessarily Judao and his crew, but it's the villains. Like some of them who should be more serious and threatening are not. Like they're just not. Like what's his name? From Zeta, one of the bad guys, one of the Titans makes it. He lives, and they find him, and he kind of like holds them at gunpoint. He's like, "Hey kids, just tell me how to get out of here," and he does. But he starts like coming off as goofy when he was this ruthless killer in Zeta. I can't remember his name right now. It's the blonde guy, not Jared, the other one. And he just kind of like is like written really goofy all of a sudden when he didn't really need to be. Mashmar is really goofy, and that's basically it. You see him simping for Haman. You know, he's her white knight. He wants to protect her and uphold her ideals and whatever you want to call that. He is that, like to like the extreme notion. But anyway, Judao basically kind of inadvertently starts helping out the Argama. Bright meets him and talks to him. It's like, hey, we could use your help. And he's like, no way, pops. I'm out of here. In that kind of attitude. And but it continues on, and I think I think it's really good. I think Double Z is really good. People just need to give it a chance. People just need to get past the first part. I will say, like, one of my notes says Moon Char soon sucks. The series is much better after it's over, and I completely agree that when you get to the Moon part, it's gonna suck. Just get through that. It's really dumb. Like, supposedly there's a Gen 1 colony that's had people on there and they're like tribal, and it's like, what the fuck is this? How do these people, well, you want to talk about side one being untouched by war for the most part? These people completely don't know what age they're living in. They're like worshiping like mobile suits like they're gods, and it's like so stupid. But it introduces you to the Moon sisters. I don't fucking remember their name. And they have this weird new type powers, and that's why they're kind of like revered a little bit. And it's a stepping stone. It's a very minor thing. I think after that, and after the introduction of Chara Soon, who is like, "What the fuck is this?" Eventually, she gets aboard the Argama. They capture her, and she becomes like she's like washing laundry and shit. It's like, what the fuck? Get past that. It's good. Let me put it this way: the turning point is the second part of the season. When you start hearing the intro silent voice, it's gonna get good. All right. I like it. I like it a lot. I don't know why. I can't really quantify it as well as I want to. Why I like Double Zeta. I think because after I finished Zeta, I was kind of like getting serious into Gundam, and I was like, people kept saying Double Zeta is gonna suck. It's gonna suck. It's gonna suck. I was like, and went into it fully ready for it to be like the worst thing ever. And while I wasn't initially like impressed or anything by Judao, I was like, he's not that bad. That was my reaction. And I went into it with no expectations, and at least the expectation or one expectation, and that's to have no expectation, and that I knew the series was going to be tonal whiplash because of just the person who created it did it that way. And but I was going to give it a shot because it's again 50 something episodes, and it moves the story along pretty importantly. I think a lot of people will write it off and be like, "Nah, you can skip, go from Zeta to fucking Char's Counterattack." I'm like, no, no. You're gonna be like, we're gonna miss out on one whole Neo Zeon war, and you're gonna wonder why Zeon's suddenly fucking back. You know, I will say it's still disappointing because you see Char and Amuro in the intro of Double Zeta, but they're never there. Char and Amuro never make appearances in Double Zeta, even though they're slated to, because of Char's Counterattack was given the green lit. So Tomito's like, oh well, shit, can't put them in Double Zeta. We're gonna put them in this motion picture, which is the next thing. We're not there yet. We're still talking about Double Zeta. But it really does get good. So just get past the first half. The Moon is definitely the lowest point. I think that's really silly and unnecessary, even though it does have some setup for later. Like it's not entirely, just kicked under the rug. There is some plot there. I don't really think it's important though. Uh, Tonal shift with Mashmire in the beginning versus the end. That was the other thing that is a callback from the first of the season to the end was Mashmire goes away and you remember as a goofy villain, he gets basically cyber new type enhanced, and he comes back in the end, and he's like fucking unstable and insane. He's still the same guy in the sense that he's still like, oh, Haman sama banzai, I love you, I will protect you. He's like that, but he's like to the nth degree. He's like kind of unstable, and I think it's not that bad. I still, for whatever weird reason, like him like that. It's like he's goofy still, but he's like now he's like a badass, and he just doesn't give a shit and goes out like one. Yeah, and then but the main part of the story is Haman Karn. The Earth Federation's kind of been beaten into submission or is in disarray in general, but the Argama eventually gets mostly kids left to pilot arguably the best Gundam team ever. And they keep getting like new shit as the series goes on. So at least there's that. So if you don't really like the characters, you can at least hang in there because you know new tech's coming. Like this is the best Gundam team ever. You get the Mark II, the Zeta, and the Double Zeta, which is seen here, at least the head of it. And the Double Zeta is like a behemoth compared to the prior Gundams. It is probably marks the point of the series where Gundams were at the most bulky fucking stature point. Like the Double Zeta is so huge. After this, they don't get that big. They're not that crazy and not that bulky. The Double Zeta is so big that they have a whole transformation sequence to just fucking activate the damn thing with the core fighter, the core top, and the core base. I think it was silly and it's written in just to, be like, ooh, transforming robot, cool to the kids, but I think it's silly. Didn't really need to be transformable like that. Why couldn't they just leave the double Zeta as it's saying? That's the other thing about the double Zeta is like it's a behemoth and has a whole shit ton of high powered beam weaponry, including mega beam sabers, a high particle cannon on its head, and the double fucking barrel, beam rifle it carries around. It drains a lot of its energy, and eventually later it gets improved, but it's almost negligible by the time it happens because it's at the end of the series. But I really love the Double Zeta a lot in terms of design. I think it's just fucking an absolute unit. So there's a lot of points with Haman Karn. Since she's the main antagonist, her and well, there's a lot of plot stuff involving Judo and his sister getting taken by Xeon, and a lot of stuff happens later. I won't outright spoil it, but I'll just say that it's very pivotal her place in the story. But it's a lot of it is Judo meeting Haman and them instantly having this weird connection with each other. It's played very strangely, like it's like romantic, but Haman's so much older than Judo, but it never quite gets that point outright because Judo, he's got a very good sense of self, and he's like, you know what, you're evil. I don't like you. And it only gets exacerbated later by Haman's own actions, but she keeps trying to sway him. She's like, come to my side. I could use you. And he initially kind of is like, maybe. And then he realizes, oh no, you're bad. I don't like what you do, to put it simply. And, I don't like this war, but I'm going to fight anyway because I'm tired of it kind of thing. So I don't know, I guess his ambitions could be a little bit muddled, but I think he ultimately is pretty straight shooting in terms of Gundam protagonists so far because you have Amuro who really resists a lot. You have Camille who's a little too hot headed about it and, just is so. He's trying to do the right thing but doesn't because it's just, there is no right or wrong necessarily in war. War is just bad all the way around. And Judo kind of falls in the same thing, but I feel like he's fighting more for himself and his friends than he is a cause that embodies a uh, side of the war. Like he's not fighting for the AU. I think he mentions that specifically. He's like, I'm doing it for myself and my friends. And the group. This is a group that you're going to run with for most of this. And of course, you have Noah. He eventually leaves, though, at the end of that to also set up for Char's counterattack. But Bright Noah is with the Argama for most of this. Haman Karn, and then ultimately Glemmy Toto, who is also introduced in the beginning of the series, is like a goofy like underling to Mashmar, who comes back later as like complete Giran Zabi clone. He's like straight up like Space Hitler #2 at this point. It's weird how crazy he gets. So, I acknowledge that Double Zeta has some really weird plot stuff going on. Like, people just start up the series kind of like, I'm goofy, and come back later like fucking murder machines, But I mean, has changed at this point too. He's not like that though, but he's kind of gotten focused at the end, and I think the cyber new type enhancement thing that's going on gets a little out of hand at the end, and that is shown even further, probably shown in the best example of the Puru, or Puru 2, Puru, and Glemmy Toto, who created them, because Judah runs into Puru, who is in the same spot as Lena, his sister, with Neo Zeon at that point in the story. And he's like, oh, you're just another young girl like my sister. And she gets really attached to him. And she's honestly a really annoying aspect of Double Zeta. She's the worst part of Double Zeta for me, but it's technically a huge plot point later, especially for Unicorn Gundam, but she serves a good purpose in furthering the story of Neo Zeon, and definitely furthering how crazy Glemmy Toto gets because of the Puru clones and the new type stuff. Second half, I'm almost done with Double Zeta, but the second half of Double Zeta is amazing with silent voice. It's my favorite Gundam OP. I like it. I think the second half of Double Zeta makes up for the first part. So if you just absolutely cannot stomach the first part, I think Double Zeta really pulls it together at the end. I think it's really good. I think it's really worth it. I don't think people should skip Double Zeta because Char's Counterattack is going to make even less sense. Or definitely don't be like me, where in the West, the first exposure I had to Gundam was Gundam Wing, right? And then Doubles 0079. And I was like, wow, this is really old. And then my next exposure to UC Gundam was Char's Counterattack. So I went from 0079 Char's Counterattack. I had no idea what was going on. I was like, what is this? Why is everybody so much older? Why is everything so high quality animation now? Like, what's happened? Because Zeta and Double Zeta didn't come out in the West until way fucking later. So, I mean, there's still not even an official English dub for Double Zeta. It's like everybody doesn't like it. They're like, oh, Double Zeta sucks. I'm like, fuck you. It's good. I think it's good. I like it a lot. And I think I can take its goofy tonal whiplash quality in stride, because I'm like, I need that after Zeta. Like, I watch Zeta, it's depressing, but I like it. It's the best series, best part of the series, in my opinion. And then you get to Double Zeta, and I like it too, because it's like, oh, okay, here's some brevity, but things are still really serious. We're just not outright showing you right away. And then the series goes on, and Neo Zeon kind of gets insane and implodes, and you kind of come to understand Haman, and you understand what Judau's doing, obviously, because he's the protagonist. He's been telling you the whole time, but he gets serious, and he's like, you know what? It's time to end this, and that's Double Zeta. I think it's really good. I really think people should give it a chance. If you just absolutely cannot stomach the first half, then please watch the second half. You may not know what's going on because there are callbacks to the first half of the season, but I think it's really, really good. I really, really like Double Zeta. It's up there for me. I don't really have the list of Gundam series in the UC timeline quantified down to a numeric order in terms of my favorite, but I would definitely put Double Zeta up there with Zeta. I think they're great companion pieces. I like watching them back to back. I like watching Zeta and then going to Double Zeta. And as soon as I hear silent voice, I want to watch Double Zeta or Anime Janai, because it's not anime. This is not anime. I don't know what's doing on the list. Anime Janai. But anyway, that's Double Zeta. I would recommend it. I would say don't listen to people telling you not to watch it. I think it's important to watch, especially if you're going to watch Unicorn later. It may not necessarily be important for Char's Counterattack, but it will set the scene a little bit as to why things are happening immediately in Char's Counterattack that you wouldn't get otherwise if you just went from Zeta to CCA. But I definitely recommend you watch Double Zeta if you're going to watch Unicorn, because there's a huge plot point in Unicorn that is you won't get unless you've watched Zeta. Double Zeta, I mean. So anyway, moving on. Next we have Gundam Char's Counterattack, the motion picture. That's the next in line. This is now UC 0093. So Double Zeta took place in 0088, right after Zeta, and this is a few years later. And it is I think it's the first movie of Gundam. I think I could be wrong. I don't really know in terms of like, I'm not really down with like when the animations came out chronologically in real life, but I'm just following the UC timelines. Anyway, because it is a motion picture, it is very, very high quality. I would say Char's Counterattack's up there for one of the best animated anime movies of all time. Just in general, animated movies like Akira, Do You Remember Love, Macross. I think this is up there with them because it is very, very good. Basically, a real life culmination of Gundam to this point and concludes the Char Amuro feud in what we have is the second Neo Zeon War, technically. Unit of Char's madness and his loss of humanity. I think he's still very charismatic. He obviously is large and in charge in this part of the thing because his name's in the damn movie title. And he comes in. We don't know what he's been doing up to this point. It's never explained, and the movie just fucking starts with him in charge of Neo Zeon. All of Neo Zeon's rallied under him, and he's pushing forward with his agenda. Tech has advanced very far with the Sazabi and the new Gundam, which the new Gundam is basically introduced at the very start of the movie with the title. You see it. It's still being kind of assembled at Anaheim Electronics, which is a huge player at this point. It's making tech from both sides. The movie goes so far to even explain that because it shows that they're supplying Neo Zeon and the AUG. You get basically the old white base team back just about. You get Noah, at least Noah and Amuro. They actually went and have formed their own group called Londo Bell. And they're on the spear tip to fight Neo Zeon. There's a point now where you've seen 0079, right? And it's kind of, I would almost say that the mobile suits are primitive in that. They got like crab claws and big Zam feet and stuff like that, and Zeong shooting hands. And, we got through Zeta. Double Zeta really pushed the bill, and I think sets up nicely for the technology getting so far forward. You have the 360 panoramic, interior with the mobile suits. And here we are in UC 0093 with Char's Counterattack, and we have the introduction of Psycho Frame parts, and well, Psycho Frame's fucking OP, and it is portrayed even crazier in Unicorn Gundam, which comes after this. But that's one of my notes. New Gundam is arguably OP as fuck because it is. I mean, Sazabi is really badass too. They have, beam scatter shot things, beam axes, and everybody's got funnels now because new types and cyber new types and Neo Zeon kept on with that. And, you basically just have, honestly, this whole quote unquote second Neo Zeon war, and I have it technically written down because I don't really think it was an official war. I think this is just honestly Char suddenly starts pushing the remnants of Neo Zeon to go on with almost like a crazy suicide attack. It's like they're dropping all kinds of stuff. Char just straight up wants to put Earth on ice again by dropping Axis onto Earth. And this brings me to some of the other main characters of the story that I absolutely hate, and that's Hathaway and Quest Pariah are the worst parts of this movie. You can honestly take them out, and I wouldn't miss them. Char and Amuro are adults now. Obviously, Char's older, but Amuro is much, much older than he was in the original series. He's with Noah, and they have Londo Bell. He's in charge in that, and he's now fighting back because he was sitting back in Zeta but he finally started acting at the middle of that series, and who knows what the hell he was doing during Double Zeta, but apparently stuff has been going on that we weren't seeing. Otherwise, this movie wouldn't be where it was. So, yeah, but you have to put up with Hathaway, who's Noah's son, who is now older, because in Zeta he was like a bab still, but he's older now. And then Quest, who's just some spoiled little bitch. And all the emotions of teenagers are running wild, and Char takes full advantage of it, of Quest and Hathaway by extension, and a lot of bad shit happens. Char's counterattack is very much back to kill 'em all, and while I say technically it's the second Neo Zeon war, it's not like a full blown war like the AU and the Titan was, and the 1 year war by any means. It's very short, very fast, very intense. He feels like humanity won't evolve, won't move on from Earth unless he ices the damn planet and kills everybody on it. That's his philosophy for Neo Zeon. And everybody supports him because he's got the devil's charisma, basically. I think somewhere along the point, I would love like an installment to figure out why the hell he got so crazy. Because between Zeta and now, he has changed a lot. I think he just wants to escape being who he is, maybe, but is just off the rails. I think that's what makes Char so great is that he it starts off as a revenge tale and then it becomes what am I fighting for, not to quote Zero, but it is like that. And then he at some point kind of starts becoming even more twisted than what he already was cuz he's not like when 0079 starts, he's like a teenager. He's like 20 something. And he is already twisted by revenge, but like he is really, really like crazy now. He just has got like these heavy-handed ideals. In the beginning, it's funny because this is why I like the Char Amro rivalry so much is because when it started, I liked Char. I didn't like Amro. I was like, Amro's a whiny bitch. Char, I get why he's doing. He's technically a bad guy, but I get why he's doing what he's doing. But by the time we get to Char's counterattack and having taken in everything from the origin and Zeta and Double Zeta and watching Char and how he acts through the movie of Char's counterattack, I'm now on the side of okay, I'm with Amro now because Char is he's gone off the rails. He's going too far. This is not about him anymore. This is not about like his ideals of leading Xeon into a new future. This is just straight up him wanting to just kill everybody. I think that is because he just doesn't really know who he is anymore. I think he's kind of lost it to all the hatred and revenge and just the endless war fighting and ceaseless combat he's been a part of, and all the lofty expectations people put on him as the son of Zeon Zum Daikun, who was killed. He can't live up to that because did anybody really know what Zeon Zum Daikun wanted independence for space noids? I mean, I don't think so. I think maybe only Dagon Zabi and the people around him at the time knew, but they're all dead. So here we are. We have Char, twisted and messed up. So the movie eventually, ends up with Axis plummeting towards Earth because of Char's stealthy, not so stealthy plans to push it that way. You have Amuro, his love interest, Chan, and Hathaway on the Londo Bell side. You have Char, oh man, what's her name? The woman who supports him and is his lover. He doesn't really love her. I don't think Char is capable of love at this point. I think she's just a piece of this puzzle, and that's how he looks at it because he's like the ultimate space sociopath. I think it sums it up well. The two younger kids wanting to, well, Hathaway likes Quest, and Quest kind of is just doing her own thing selfishly. Joins with Char, gets used to kill a bunch of people, and Hathaway also kind of loses and kills people. Which brings me to my second to last note for Char's counterattack, which is bittersweet ending again, lots of death once again, people die. And my last note, the end of most of the main cast and ties most loose ends together. You get the ultimate showing of Gundam tech, psycho frame, new types, willpower, space magic, whatever you want to call it. And I think one of the best cinematic moments at the end of this movie with Axis falling to Earth and the battle to blow up part of Axis, which they do, but the other piece still falls to Earth and it can still plummet into like a nuclear winter. And Char being defeated by Amro and Amro taking New Gundam and pushing back Axis, which results into a phenomenon known as the Axis miracle. and I think it's a really well done scene cinematically. I think it's beautiful. Does it make a lot of sense? I mean, how seriously do you take new type stuff? I think it's good. I don't think it's like overdone. I think from what has been established in the series so far, I think it works really well. Battle for Axis is like it's the second half of the movie and it's really good. Um, and it ends the feud. The battle is over. Axis is falling to Earth, and then the Axis miracle happens, where I think it's just really well done. I don't. I'm hesitating to say outright what happens, but you see a combination of both sides, kind of like realizing that this is going to be bad. Earth is going to be uninhabitable. Let's help. And ultimately, does it really help? Maybe. If the ending is kind of left purposely vague, but it obviously Earth gets spared barely, um, and that's it. Both it's just both assumed. It's never outright shown, but it's basically both assumed because of what happened at the end of Char's counterattack that Char and Amuro are dead. That's it. Everybody's dead. Hathaway's dead. Char's dead. Amuro's dead. Chan's dead. I think the only people that live are Noah, Bright Noah, and he lives. He's pretty fucked up after this, needless to say, and that's the end of Char's counterattack. Yeah, it wraps everything up very nicely. I wish there was a little bit more story going into it, though. I wanted to appreciate it more, and I couldn't because there was a lot of stuff that's just left vague, and I was like, why is this happening? Why is Charlotte here? What has Char been doing this whole time? Last we saw him as Quattro, but well, it is what it is. Maybe one day they like doing a bunch of stuff in the UC timeline, and that brings us to our next installment, Gundam Unicorn, or Gundam UC as it's otherwise known, Gundam Unicorn. It is now UC 0096, which is 3 years later than the events at the end of Char's counterattack. And tech has gone even further with the Unicorn Gundam designed to kill new types. Yep, we get the introduction of the new type destroyer system installed in the fully psycho framed Unicorn Gundam. And well, Unicorn Gundam is kind of crazy. Obviously, as you can see from the picture, that it was made much later. I think it came out in what 2013, but it evolves around uh, Banagir Lynx, and what is it, Meridia Cruz, and Maneva Zabi, who is the girl on the right, also known as what's her name? She names herself a fake name at the end, and fucking Banagir goes with it. It's Auburn Hepfrey, like that, basically. Anyway, Mineva Zabi, she's the last surviving Zabi, and it was the daughter. She's the daughter of, as you see it in the origin, she's the daughter of Dozul and that one girl from the Xeon army. And she was basically the heir that you see in Zeta, whom Quattro runs into with Haman, and he doesn't like that. She kind of is there in Double Zeta with Haman, and then she disappears, and this is where she is. And she's on the run, and that's how she runs into Benajir. And this is technically the start of the third Neo Xeon War. Uh, I'm gonna be completely honest, and while some of the story elements are really good, I think the reusing of the as the bad guy Full Frontal, which is a stupid name, as like a Char clone. He's basically possessed by the spirit of Char. This is like, all right. Up until this point, like we had the climax of new type magic, space magic, with Char's counterattack. This takes that to another level on its own. It is like UC Gundam Unicorn is fucking batshit crazy with new type stuff. I still think it's good. I still think there's a lot of merits to the story. I think it's nice to see the UC timeline like immediately after Char's counterattack and all the bad stuff that happens. And we get, well, really the main villain of the story is Anaheim Electronics because they have prospered the most out of all the wars they have. They're so powerful, so rich, have all the high tech, and don't really have a side. They're their own side because they've funded both sides of the war. So are they the true bad guys? It's up to you. Um, yeah, one of my main notes is good story, but gets kind of out of hand with the tech and new type powers. And I have in parentheses the end of time. That's a thing. There's this whole plot with the Laplace's box, which is like this thing that's mysterious that was from the beginning of the UC era, and now almost 100 years later, it was supposed to be given or something's supposed to happen. You don't know what it is. Everybody's looking for it. Both sides, the Neo Zeon side, the Federation side, or whoever they are at this point. They're just I think they're back to just being the Federation and Neo Zeon are all looking for this shit, and Anaheim or whatever. And so Unicorn Gundam gets given to or gets found by the creator, and then the creator's son is manager and or whatever. It's convoluted as fuck. Doesn't really need to be, but it is. He pilots Unicorn Gundam, and it is fucking stupid powerful. It honestly, because it's got like its normal unicorn mode, and then as you see it, it opens up and becomes the new type killing fucking crazy badass psycho frame Gundam. Yeah, it turns red. It just goes crazy. I think Unicorn is good. I do think it gets out of hand. I think wraps up things nicely. There is just the end is just so out there though with new type magic and stuff. At this point, it's like if you've watched this far in the series, then you're probably going to watch this because you like Gundam. Otherwise, you would have never made it past Zeta or the first one. Honestly, I think it goes a little too far with the psycho frame and the new type stuff that can affect the psycho frame. They basically can bend reality in space time with the power of your willpower in the psycho frame Gundam, like the Unicorn and the Banshee, which is the evil version at the end, Banshee and Unicorn are sealed away over how crazy Psycho Frame tech is. That's actually true. I won't really outright spoil the end, but a bunch of stuff happens, and they're basically people at the end are like, "Oh, we beat some fucking monsters. Let's put these things away." And technology actually regresses after this. Oh well, let me mention this. There's a really good plot point involving Meridia. That's her name, right? Why did it say Miranda? Is it Miranda? It's not Miranda Cruz. It's Meridia. What the fuck? I don't know why I spelled it like that. The girl with orange hair, this one on the left. She's actually a very important character and as has ties with Double Zeta. That was really interesting, like reveal. Hard to talk about Unicorn because it's shorter. It's not like a full series, and much of how Char's counterattack, it's very very short, very intense. There's a lot of things that happen. There's a lot of space magic with the new type stuff. I think it's good. I think it's worth watching, but I would not get too hyped up because the ending is kind of out there. It's okay. I like it. I don't like full frontal though. I think that's stupid and lazy. I think if we're gonna keep doing Neo Zeon, we need to have like a whole new Neo Zeon, not like Neo Zeon version 3, because by all means, at the end of Char's counterattack, you get the impression that Neo Zeon's done. I mean, Char's dead. Why would Neo Zeon still be around? Wouldn't they just basically get absorbed by what's left of the Federation or whatever? Anyway. But after this, they seal away the Banshee and the Unicorn, and then technology regresses after this, going into the late UC gap into Gundam F91. Or as I used to call it before I actually knew it was just F91, Gundam Formula 91. I don't really even know what the F stands for. I don't know what the F91 stands for other than that's just the name of the Gundam that's in the thing. Again, here we go. It's a movie. We're now up to UC 123. So Gundam Unicorn takes place in UC 96. This is a late time skip to UC 123. Uh Federation still exists at this point. There really hasn't been much to challenge it, but there's now like a weird aristocracy of this like highborn people called Cosmo Babylonia, who are the antagonists of the series, and it revolves around the long lost missing daughter of said family called Cecily, and what's his name? Seabrook Arno or whatever. I think this is his name. Seabrook something. I think it's Arno. It was a series slated for a 25 to 50 episode condensed into a 2-hour movie. So it's again a really high quality, top notch animation movie. I have Cecily's hair, LOL, in parentheses because they do an amazing job with her hair, just like being animated. It's kind of crazy and almost unnecessary, but it has some bad pacing issues. I think the first 30 minutes are solid. The invasion part of the Cosmo Babylonia is really good. I think it's great. I think it's portrayed very well. It's very fluid, very kinetic. It moves very quickly, and you quickly introduced to the people who live in the colony. The things that happen, the invasion happens, they're all moving together. People start getting hurt. Get to see how terrible everything is. Cecily's running around. You get Seabrooks, he springs into action. But after that, I think the movie is paced very well. Which I mean, if it was really just supposed to be a 25-50 episode plot, series condensed into a movie, of course it's going to have pacing issues. I think the going back to the invasion part, it says first 30 minutes are solid throughout invasion part, shows brutality of war well, does. Seabrook is an older protag. I like him. That was my notes on him. I think yeah, he's not as young as the other Gundam protagonist. He's not even really a Gundam protagonist. He's a mechanic, which makes me I like him a lot more because I'm a mechanic, or I was a mechanic. He's pretty straightforward. There's really not a lot going on that's like crazy or anything. I mean, obviously this like Unicorn came out way later. This came out way back in like the 90s or something when this movie came out. So it takes place after Unicorn, but we're moving back to like an older plot, older animation. So it's nowhere near as crazy as Unicorn was. I think that was the point at the end of Unicorn. It says technology regresses, and here we are now, and we actually got the F91 Gundam who doesn't even show up for a while. And yeah, it says mobile suit tech regressed and became more compact. The F91. The main tech here is the biocomputer made by Seabrook's mom. She's the developer. We have that aspect going on, like Camille, where Camille's mom and dad were both inventors and designers of mobile suits and stuff. And we have Seabrook, who's like a mechanic, just an everyday man going to school or whatever. And his mom's she's made most of the F91 and the biocomputer. He also has a sister in this story too. And I actually really liked it. It says I like the family cohesion. They seem normal enough. I mean, it's Gundam, so how normal can it be? But I really enjoy the familial aspect of it because I think they all interact throughout the movie as a family pretty well. And like they're pretty like the mom's kind of estranged to him, and the sister who live together, and they obviously act very brother and sisterly, but I think that's great because it's juxtaposed between Sicily and her weird family and slash non-existent family. And anyway, the F91 has the biocomputer, which is not Psycho Frame. We've moved away from that. It's nowhere near as crazy. The F91 is actually small. They don't have a separating core fighter anymore or any kind of transformable things. It's one solid unit. He gets in through the top of the chest of the Gundam, and it's just you're in the cockpit. There is no separation. And the biocomputer, somewhat related to, it's not related to Psycho Frame, but it kind of acts in the sense of it senses the pilot's intentions through biological readings and stuff, and therefore can activate certain parts of the Gundam. But it's not like straight up magic frame Gundam that is powered by your willpower or hopes and dreams or whatever you want to call Psycho Frame. So it's kind of a step back. I like it. I enjoyed it. I think the Gundam's cool. I don't think it's anything outstanding though, because I saw this very late in the series. This is the last thing I watched before I watched the final installment of Turn A, which I'll get to. And I was like, yeah, that's about right where we should be right now in the story. I think it's interesting that it takes place so late in the UC timeline. UC 123. This is like, this is so much later than what's going on in 0079. And I think the movie depicts the Federation kind of barely hanging on at this point. Like, that's barely the Federation. And they're barely in control of anything because they're kind of been around so long that I don't really know because movie moves so fast because it's so much like content. It's basically like, oh, here's Federation, they're barely hanging on. Oh, hey, invasion, here's Cosmo Babylonia. Oh, rich people. Oh, and then here we go. And now we're fighting like a mini war. It says overall, my last note says it. I don't have much to say about this. Overall, it could have been a great series, but we'll never know. Basically, I think the end of the movie. I like the ending of the movie and the fact that the crazy main bad guy is the father. It's very Star Wars. Like he's like, "I am your father," to Cecily. And he has a crazy, stupid, ugly looking mobile armor or whatever. Controls stuff through new type psychic bullshit, and it's like these flying discs of death, and Seabrook's piloting the F91, and he's looking for Cecily, and that's kind of how the movie just ends. He's looking for her in space. I do like the aspect of Cecily of how she kind of realizes what was going on very quickly. I mean, she kind of has to because it's the damn movie, but she realizes that, oh, this is supposedly my family, Cosmo Babylonia. I don't think I want any part of this. Let me go back to what I know. And she, goes back to Seabrook's side, which it's really like just Cosmo Babylonia versus whatever's going on. The movie does such a poor job of explaining exactly what's still left, what's going on right now, other than just people living in space. They've been living here for like over 100 years now, and Federation's still around, and there's generally been peace, sorta. I mean, they've been developing mobile suits, so how much peace is there really? Anyway, I think F91's pretty good. I think it's worth watching. It's just this short 2 hour movie. So if you made it through Char's Counterattack and Unicorn, definitely watch this. I think it's harder to find. I had a hard time finding F91 for a while, but I finally found it because I've wondered about it for years because I knew it was in the UC timeline, but there was next to nothing about this movie anywhere. And then I finally, found out, when I started buying all the Gundams installments last year and year before that, eventually I got my way around to F91, and it was worth it. I really like it. I think Eternal Wind's a very good song, and I think the F91 Gundam's okay. It's very normal after coming off a Unicorn. God, it's like Unicorn's like suddenly eating a huge crazy meal of the most crazy ingredients, but it's really good. And then you go down to F91, which is also really good. It's like a really, really good artisan burger that you like. It's very familiar. You like it. It's good. It does feel a little alien in the sense that it's so far in the future, but honestly, Unicorn kind of breaks everything in terms of cohesion between, time wise. If you're watching it all in chronological order, then I would almost say well, you have to watch Gundam if you're doing that. I would almost say though, just watch Char's Counterattack and skip Unicorn and go straight to F91. But then you go back to Unicorn, you're going to be like, well, wait a minute, there's some stuff tying into Double Zeta here. So I would say, no, never mind, just watch them in chronological order. But know that F91 is going to suffer because it's like the technology in Unicorn is just so out there in F91. It's like, we're going backwards now? Going backwards in tech, but forward in time. So that is F91. Great song. There's some great characters. I don't know how I felt about Cecily, but I think she was okay. And Seabrook's okay. There's really not enough time to develop anything in F91. That's why my last note is like overall could have been a great series, but we'll never know. And so after that, we're moving on to Victory Gundam. All right, I'm gonna make this fast because honestly, Victory, I watched it one time a very long time ago, and I haven't got it. This is the one part of the UC timeline I don't own. I don't own Victory Gundam. It takes place even later than F91 in UC 153, and I'm trying to remember most of it. What I have down here is Zanskar Empire Invasion. Uso and Shakti are the main characters. Uso being the boy, Shakti being the girl, and they're like friends. Uh, the Victory Gundam and its mass production is the other thing. I'm not even really sure what's left here. Like now, people are back on Earth, but the Zanskar is basically taking over space. Because the story shifts from being a space story from with F91 back to being like, oh, here's people on Earth, and Earth is, I think, at this point is starting to recover. I'm not really sure. I seemingly remember the Earth being really fucked up still, and just this whole series is really fucked up. It takes place. I mean, it was made in like the '90s, right around the '95 and stuff with Wing and G Gundam and stuff like that. But you have it is one of the main series is in the UC timeline, and you have the following of Uso and Shakti because Shakti is just a human MacGuffin and gets taken and converted and then turns against and then let go and then joins Uso and then gets taken again. I don't know. It's fucking mental. I honestly really didn't enjoy Victory Gundam a whole lot. I don't hate it. Like it didn't do anything that really put me off, other than it was just really kind of boring. I would need to watch it again with the eyes I have now because back then I may have just been like, at the point I got to Victory, I was like, oh, this is just so much. But I know a lot of people like it. I don't think it's terrible. I think it's really probably one of the more darker Gundam series, along with Zeta. I think it's pretty heavy-handed, and I think it's so heavy-handed. It's not necessarily just dark anymore. I think it's just straight up Tomino being depressed when he wrote the damn thing, because it just kills everybody. It's like all kids, a couple adults running this resistance against the Zanskare, because obviously Uso has the Gundam, so therefore he's fighting against the people who have scare in their name, and then just everybody getting fucking murdered. Dark overtones slash everyone dies is my next note. Old Judao makes an appearance. That was the crazy thing that I read that I'm not even sure I remember seeing, but apparently Judao at this point, he's an old man. He's been living on Jupiter, shows up and helps fight against the Zanskare Empire, but I don't remember that. I don't know if this is in a spin-off manga or what the hell is going on. The next note after that says, my memory is hazy on the series. You goddamn right, because I don't remember most of it. I do remember this young lass who is basically one of the craziest people in the series. What's her name? Kate Gina? Yeah, she becomes basically the series' antagonist versus Uso. She gets progressively more crazy, and her motivations, if I remember correctly, are very self-serving. I don't know. She likes to use people. She straight up goes from being like a bully to just like a fucking psychopath at the end of the series, because of that's how like crazy Victory Gundam is in terms of ramping things up. And there's like this weird angel ring at the end that apparently turns people into the nano machines or whatever the fuck it is supposed to be. I honestly don't really remember, and I feel like maybe I should have waited and saw this again before I decided to do this little, podcast radio bit about Gundam, but I don't know when I'll see Victory Gundam next, because I'm not exactly jumping at the bit to buy it, but I definitely do think I need it because I own all the rest of the Gundams and I need to put this in the UC collection because it's part of it. The Victory Gundam itself is pretty straightforward. Honestly, it's got a core fighter system again, so it's kind of back to the regular normal Gundam. It's not like F91; it's a bit bigger and stuff, but still relatively small. Uses a beam shield, beam saber, beam rifle. Has like the Victory version gets an upgrade. It has like flying golden wing thingies. Kind of looks very similar to Rush and Mega Man's Fusion and Mega Man 7, where he has those little jetpacks. Similar to that. I don't care for it a whole lot. I think it's a little plain. Um, but I guess that serves the plot well. It's pretty straightforward Gundam. I don't know if it does anything crazy. I remember like a lot of it gets destroyed, but because they mass produced the damn thing, they could just keep swapping in and out parts. But it's a lot of hey, look, oh, I like this person dead. And the Zanskare uses some weird fucking mobile suits that look like bugs, and then there's a giant tire. I don't know. I wasn't really into it, man. I don't like it. But after End of the Victory Gundam, you get the next one, which is probably the ultimate Gundam in the UC timeline, and that's Ton A Gundam. Yep. All right. So the thing about Turn A is that it's technically the end timeline for all timelines in the Gundam UC or the Gundam series as a whole. And that means, you saw the thing at the start: Wing, G Gundam, whatever. This is it. It all culminates in a combined era known as the correct century, and it is correct century 2345. We are like thousands and thousands and thousands of years into the future where humanity has almost entirely reset. When I say reset, I mean like humanity has split. Like apparently war went on for so long. So okay, so this is how Turn A works. All the other Gundam timelines, the things that have happened, have all technically happened, and they're all condensed into a thing called the Dark History, which humanity has basically forgotten. Because at some point, everybody that was left in space moved and started living on the moon, and they're the moon race, and the rest of humanity was sent down to Earth to like make it like pioneer it because it is recovered over these thousands and thousands of years. Earth has, and humanity reset in the sense that the people on Earth basically have evolved and worked their way back up from being tribal. There's still like some tribal stuff, and back up to steam engines and guns and things like that. And humanity's back at that. There's nations again, and they fight each other with like guns and stuff. It's very like 1900s technology, steam stuff. Whereas the moon race has basically stayed on the moon until the point in time where they're waiting for the Earth to get better, and they're going to come back and take what's always has been theirs, I guess. But the people on Earth don't know that because they've been there so long and they don't know anything about the moon race. And it brings us like 2,300 fucking years into the correct century, and here we are, where humanity's high technology fought itself into extinction is basically what's been applied. Like so many wars have happened, and then technology advances so far to some point that almost everybody was dead, and the people that were left were like, we're going to live on the moon. Half of them are going to be in cryostasis. The other half are going to be awake at switching at intervals. And everybody else that is able is going to go down to Earth and like get it ready for us to come back. That is the premise to set up for Turn A. Turn A is like, it's so far in the future, it kind of feels like its own thing, which it technically is. It is its own thing. It's not really connected to UC, but I'm going to put it as an honorary last spot here because in the main timeline, because it is the culmination of all timelines and it's just that damn good. Turn A is very good, and I was so put off for so long by looking at the Turn A itself and not liking the design because it's called the mustache, rightfully so. It has a giant fucking mustache. So you'll hear a lot of time as it referred to as the mustache or the white doll because that's what it starts up as. So the remnants of Earth has split. Yeah, high technology is still on the moon. They still have the high technology on the moon. It's still quite a bit dumbed down from whatever is implied to have happened between all the other Gundam series and now, because the Turn A itself is very, very, very advanced, and I'll get to that in a second. Race basically decides its time. There was a certain amount of like planning that went involved in this. It didn't just like one day happen, but they have a queen on the moon, and her name is Queen Diana, and she is served by her servant named Harry Ord, who is like her royal guard. The mobile suits in the series all look like the Turn A. They're all designed by a futurist designer, Sid Mead, and he did the concept of the Turn A and the sumo suits that Harry Ord and the Royal Guard uses, and all the other weird mobile suits. I say weird, but it's only weird when you compare them to the rest of the series. Like, it's not the traditional looking mobile suits for the most part. However, as the series go on, and the plot expands with basically the moon race invades. They invade with mobile suits, and Earth is like, what the shit is this? And they're like running around and shooting beams and stuff, and like the humans on Earth are fighting against it with like guns, bolt action rifles, powder cannons, wooden ships with cannons, and maybe some, I think they have like metal ships and stuff. They had just basically had invented like some small engines for cars. They have a few cars drive around and like trucks and stuff, then riding horses. It's very 1900s. Like it's that's what they're fighting against. So they just instantly get defeated almost. One of the main protagonists of the series, his name is Lauron, or AKA Laura. as Gwen calls him, but I'll get into that. Um, and he, in traditional Gundam protagonist fashion, stumbles upon a mobile suit inside of a statue known as the White Doll. And the statue had been built around it in kind of a similar shape, and they like worshipped it or whatever. Or they thought it was like some patron deity or whatever. And he gets into it and he finds a manual, and it's like super advanced even for him from being from the moon, because Loran is one of the moon people who's come down to Earth, and he's there to like make sure Earth is good. He was part of that, but he grew up on Earth and he kind of like enjoys the Earth, and he thinks he likes the people. He serves the Heim family, which is Kiel and the younger sister, who is a big, huge player in this. They both are. There's like an uprising within the own Moonrace's faction from certain people who just want to keep fighting the war, because this is the first time like any kind of combat has happened, and the only combat there is the Turn A, the White Doll, fighting against the Moonrace, which gets quickly the he gets Loran, who pilots it, gets swiftly you know brought into the Earth Army, which is mainly just like dudes with guns and stuff. But they start digging up mobile suits from the past, which have been stored on Earth, and it's all part of the dark history. And so things quickly evolve from there, and the story progresses. And at some point, Queen Diana and Kielheim switch places because they look identical for some reason, and that creates a whole host of problems. And in like midway point through the series, I think it's a really good uh, portrayal of the horrors of nuclear weapons and the stuff from the past, because they dig some up. They don't know what it is except for one or two moon guys who are familiar with the symbol from the past. Because, like I said, none of this stuff has been touched or used in like hundreds of thousands of years. They find these nuclear weapons, and like the episode becomes very tense. I think it's one of the best episodes of the whole series about you know the nuclear bombs getting ready to go off, and they you know one guy trying to warn both sides to not fuck around with them, and bad stuff ends up happening, and it sets a precedent of, oh wow, stuff that humans made in the past is really fucked up. That's basically the whole series. Stuff that humans made in the past and our dark history is really fucked up, and the remnants of it are still around, and it's being fought in a war, even though both sides technically don't know what the full potential of things are until the very end, when they find the records of the dark past and they look at the history of stuff. The leader of Earth or whatever, or what where our protagonist fights is Gwen. He's an asshole. Lily's the best. And the final note I have on it is like it is Tomino's swan song to Gundam. I think Victory Gundam was written when he was in a dark spot, but I think Turn A was written when he was in a good spot. I think Turn A is a great send off to the T timeline, which is what I'm talking about here tonight, or today, or whenever you may be listening about of Gundam. And I think it's a very positive story compared to Victory. Bad things do happen and people do die, yes, but it's nowhere near as like kill 'em all as Victory was. And I think it's a really great story. I think I was surprised because it was so far removed to any prior notion of what Gundam is, but it's still very well animated, all hand drawn stuff, great music. Yoko Kanno did some music for it, I believe. Uh, the story's pretty good. I think it's pretty solid all the way through. I think there are some parts I wish were. I think the ending, the very, very, very ending, could have been done a little bit better, but I'm not really complaining about it. I think it was fine. I like Loran a lot. He gets called Laura by Gwen, but that's weird because Gwen's weird. And anyway, you'll have to see that for yourself. But I think Loran's a great pilot of the Turn A, and I think the Turn A itself is kind of terrifying. Um, as it should be, because my one note describing the Turn A is the Turn A is insane, made for intergalactic warfare, nanomachines, son. And that basically sums up the Turn A. It's fucking mental, because when they built the Turn A, they built a companion machine called the Turn X, and we don't really know exactly what was going on, but there is implied that they were built for intergalactic warfare, that humanity's technology and warfare had gotten to such a point that even after Unicorn and Victory and F91, technology ramped back up again. That humanity basically almost wiped themselves out, and almost wiped, and was capable of wiping things out in the entire galaxy, let alone Earth and the colonies around it and the moon or whatever. So there's a lot of implication of it tying together all the timelines, and I think that's why it's left purposely kind of vague, is so that you can watch like Seed or G Gundam or Gundam Wing, and you're like, oh, this all has a place into it. Which actually, Gundam Wing makes a split-second appearance in the series, so it's kind of great. But it shows like when they go through the dark history, it shows a bunch of the scenes from like random Gundam series. So like, there's definitely nods to other things going on. The mobile suits that get unearthed in the series that fight for the Earth people, because the Moon race all uses basically the same mobile suits, but the Earth people use like Zaku's and Kapuls and whatever they call them. They make up weird names for them, and that's kind of how they fight back. They eventually find a ship and go to the Moon. The Earth people, the Earth army, and it's a very small scale war. It's nothing like the past at all, but I think it serves to the story really well because it doesn't really need to be grandiose. It's just that everything is so far in the future that you can kind of just it stands alone. It's its own thing, and I think it's a great way to like end all Gundam series with Turn A. Apparently, there are things after it now, according to the Gundam like wiki and whatever, but I don't really understand or know what they are. Something about Reconquista G or whatever. I haven't seen it. I don't know, but to me, this is where it ends. Like this is the final piece in the Gundam UC timeline is Turn A, and any other timeline, it is the ultimate Gundam, you know, installment. And I think it's really good. I'm not gonna go into the story too much because there's a lot. It's very character driven. It's not so much mobile suits and ideals and stuff like that. I think it's a very character driven piece, especially with Queen Diana and Kiel and Lauren and her sister. I can't remember the name of. Oh man, what is her name? She's the younger sister, and her and Lauren kind of have a thing. It's very complicated, and you eventually do get a named bad guy. His name is Ging or Jim or whatever. It's not Jim, but it's spelled like a Jim. Gingham or something, and he serves the purpose of what the story needed for him to be. I don't think he's like a crazy good bad guy or anything. I think he serves the purpose. A lot of the purpose is kind of the story is breaking humanity's tendency to want to cause war. So much time has passed, and Earth has finally recovered, and there hasn't really been big wars, and technology basically got buried, literally and figuratively, so that people wouldn't fight anymore. And now we're on the verge of that again. But will humanity make the correct choice now, so far in the future? And well, that's what Turn A is about. It's been just happens to have Lauron, one of the most high tech fucking Gundams ever. But it makes sense in terms of the story. You may not like the way the Turn A looks. I know I did when I first watched it, but by the end of it, I was like, yeah, Turn A is cool. It's really crazy, but that's the point. It's supposed to be crazy. It's supposed to be like, whoa, things got out of hand. We almost killed ourselves completely as a race. Turn A, yeah, man, it's great. Definitely watch it, but I would watch it after you've watched everything and you just want to like a good ending, a good bittersweet but mostly sweet ending to Gundam. I think it's done very well. The animation's very good, holds up. It was done around like 1999, 2000 ish. So I think it's the last Gundam you're gonna get. I think that was done by hand. So it holds up really well in terms of animation. I think it's great. I really didn't talk about them because they're kind of sub series to the 1 Year War and things after. But some part of the main storyline in UC is '08 the Mess Team. I think is really great. It takes place during the 1 Year War, or really the latter half of it. It's very guerrilla style warfare with mobile suits, and it's a love story at its roots. But I think it depicts things that are going on the ground with the common soldiers and not new type stuff very well. O8 the Mess Team is very highly regarded, and I recommend you watch it. It's very good, but I wouldn't watch it until you're done with the main stuff and then go back. And in fact, from here on, that's what I'm going to recommend. It's like watch the whole series and then go back and watch these because then it'll make sense in context of the time frame of the UC timeline. War in the Pocket's very condensed. It's exactly that, War in the Pocket, which it all takes place on a colony who's secretly manufacturing a Gundam for new types, and kids get involved. A little kid named Al gets involved with the Xeon pilot, the blonde guy who shows up to basically steal the Gundam or is something along those lines, and it kind of shows how no one wins. Most of the Gundam is a story of nobody wins in war. Everybody loses stuff, and this is a very like personal tale of this particular kid and his friends and stuff. And the kid's friend Chris McKenzie, the girl with the red hair, is secretly the Gundam's pilot. He doesn't know. His friend doesn't know whom they meet, and he's a Xeon pilot, and he is there to like take over the Gundam or destroy it or whatever. I can't remember what it is, and they end up having to fight because of separation of armies and stuff like that. They don't really know. It's just all a big fucked up tale about how war is bad, and the only people who really lose out are the generation that has to follow it because they lose all their friends and family and stuff like that. The final thing I'm going to mention is the Gundam 003 Stardust Memory. I think it's probably one of the most important uh, side plots in the UC timeline, and it's one of my personal favorites, so I'm a little bit biased, I know. But I really, really love it. I wish the ending was a little bit better. At its roots, it's a romance story, but a good chunk of it describes the setup for the Titans and Zeta Gundam, and it's very, very important because it puts context to that. Like when you start Zeta, it's just going to be like there's like, oh, they're out of nowhere, but this gives really good painting of like what happens to lead up to that. And it's WA3 is about the remnants of Xeon basically causing a lot of havoc and the corruption of the Earth Federation. Mainly that, which lets that happen. So there's a lot of bad shit going on. W3's got a great soundtrack, great animation. It's an OVA. It's only about like 10, 12, 13, 14 episodes, 15 episodes. It's not a full series. It's not even a full season, but it's definitely very good. And it's very Top Gun of the anime series, or the Top Gun of the Gundam series, I like to say. So if you're gonna like that, you're gonna like 80s music and like a bunch of hotshot pilots. You'll like 003. Well, that's it for the Gundam, the UC Gundam timeline. Maybe I'll do another podcast in the future or whatever you want to call this for other Gundam series. But I really, really think it's gonna be hard to beat the UC timeline. It's the best in my opinion. Gets the most content, so it's a little, people are obviously biased to UC, but I think there's other good Gundam stuff. I like Wing. I mean, G Gundam is there. I think it's good. I think it's a bit silly, but it's good. I want to like Gundam 00. I'm trying to watch through that. It's just I gotta get back to watching that, and then whatever else may come after one of these days, Seed maybe. Um, and by design, Turn A I think is really good. But all the movies and stuff, it's great. I love Gundam, and if you've watched this far, then you love Gundam too, and you now know where I stand on the UC timeline and what generally happens. And I just wanted to talk about fucking Gundam, man. I don't really think there's a whole lot of point to this other than that. I just wanted to talk about Gundam and look at Char laughing at you. But anyway, well, that'll be it for Gundam, and I hope you enjoyed listening to me rant about Gundam and talk about Gundam and how much I like Gundam. And I'm sure there'll be more Gundam stuff in the future, but that'll be it for now. I think I've talked myself out of it. And shoot, well, now I want to watch some more Gundam. I'm actually in the middle of watching Wing again, so oh boy, one of these days maybe I'll talk about Wing, but not tonight. Tonight's just UC, and by design, Turn A. So thanks for joining me. Thanks for listening, and I will see you later, Gundam fans. Adios.